All right, everybody, we are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. And I have the brother Thea West on with us today, or tonight here in Atlanta. Brother West, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. It's been a while, but once again, thank you for joining us.
And you've been busy.
I gotta stay busy, man. They say, what's the saying that when you, please forgive me, when you have too much time, that's the devil's best friend. I
Oh, the old saying, idle mind is a devil's
there
work.
you go. Idle mind is the devil's best friend. So when you have too much time to yourself and you're not being creative, that's the devil's best friend. So I got to stay creative. But
Uh-huh.
so tonight's topic is: are illegal immigrants fighting white supremacy or partnering with white supremacy? And then give me a couple minutes. I'm gonna kind of frame how I came up with this topic. So me, a Black American, African American, descendant of the slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I do not at all support illegal immigration. I feel illegal immigration on the rate that is going will be the deathbed of Black people who are descendants of the slave trade, especially in California. So, with that being said, and you can chime in when I make this statement on how you feel,
Mm-hmm.
the whole illegal immigration situation in regards to, I guess, kids being separated from their parents. Me, I'm along the lines that, well, if you don't illegally immigrate with your kids, then you won't be separated. That's how I feel. So a close friend of mine told me that attitude means I'm supporting white supremacy, as you will call whiteism, and I'll give you opportunity to break that down as well and unpackage that. But Tia, this is the issue. So my question to him was, well, what are these illegals doing to fight white supremacy? I didn't get an answer. Then I went into, well, the illegals, the countries that they come from, they use the same, in quotation marks, white supremacy laws to keep people from illegally crossing their borders. So are you going to call that out? And again, I didn't get a response. And then we also have to just speak on, and we touched on this before, a lot of these Hispanic gangs targeting uh, Black people in LA, in the California area, also on the East Coast, to scare Black people out of neighborhoods so they can become predominantly Hispanic. To me, that's a white supremacy tactic. Um, Show me where illegal immigrants have partnered with Black people to take on white supremacy. And then a lot of these countries in which a lot of these illegal immigrants come from, the Black people who descended of the slave trade, who live in these countries, are marginalized. And these illegal immigrants, okay, treat them as if they're white supremacists and they marginalize the Black people. So again, the question is, what are illegal immigrants doing to fight white supremacy, or whiteism, as you call it? Or are they partnering with white supremacy? And it's funny, Tia. So I was reading an article today, and Black people, descendants of the slave trade, we've been talking about this for so long, how because of the savagery and of the slave trade and how we were treated with chattel slavery for 300, 400 years, the legacy of that, and then the legacy of Jim Crow and how we were pretty much marginalized through laws which targeted Black people, how there is post-traumatic slave syndrome that runs throughout the Black community. Me personally, I believe that, and it's been documented. when we bring that up, people push us to the side and say, "Hey, you guys are over exaggerating." Some people will tell us, slavery's in the past, let it go. But I read an article, I think it was on MSNBC, where they're talking about how illegal kids who are separated from their parents through illegal immigration leads to generations of like trauma. But when we brought that up as descendants of the slave trade, we were tripping, but all of a sudden now it's a real thing because it's happening to uh, these illegal immigrants. But again, when I asked the question, what are illegal immigrants doing to fight white supremacy? Never got an answer. But when we talk about are they partnering with white supremacy, there are documented instances where they have targeted Black Americans. Okay, you have the Mexican mafia, you have all these gangs, MS-13. And then let's back up a little bit, Tia. I know I'm long-winded. Just give me a second. Well, Black people have to realize the Democratic Party has always used immigration, illegal immigration, to marginalize Black people, to keep us out of the marketplace. And that starts from, when they passed laws to immigrate Italians, Irish, and Jews into America, and that was an attempt, or not even an attempt, it did disenfranchise Black people, marginalize Black people, and kept us out of the market, kept us out of competing in the marketplace. And they're still doing this to this day. But you have a lot of Black people, Thea, and I've experienced this. If you look at Black people in LA, in California, they are in a state of emergency. But for some reason, I don't know, what Maxine Waters is doing to convince these people that nothing is going on, that everything is going all okay. Whenever you bring up how Maxine Waters is doing absolutely nothing for Black people in LA, and she's focusing more on non-Black issues, whether it be trolling Donald Trump, whether it be focusing on illegal immigration, you have a lot of Black people whose head is still in the sand, okay, and won't deal with reality, how these Black leaders are not going to protect them, how illegal immigration does not benefit them. And I asked them, how does illegal immigration benefit Black people? Again, no answer. It doesn't. But they will attack people like me and you, Thea, for calling it out. I mean, what's going on, Thea? Go ahead. I mean, I was long-winded, but what's going on?
That's good. That's good. So what you have, I was on Al Sharpton's show as called into his show. I was on there just briefly about a week ago. And one thing that Al Sharpton said was that, well, we're only 12 or 14% of the population, and we can't get anything done legislatively unless we have a coalition of other people, other groups. So being that it was a limited time frame and they weren't going to give me too much time anyway, but I tried to get to the question to comment about his statement by indicating that since the late 1980s, you've had House Resolution 40 that has been on the table in the U.S. Congress, which pertains to reparations. And they have not accomplished anything with it. Nothing. So that I was asking him that because I was going to bring up the question of, okay, well, how is that coalition helping you? How is that coalition of people of color helping you? How is that multiculturalism helping you all in the Congressional Black Caucus with that? Now, I'm going to the Congressional Black Caucus and Al Sharpton, because many of the African Americans in the community, what they're going to tell you, or sometimes tell me, they're going to echo what they heard Al Sharpton say, or what they heard some members of Congress say, black members of Congress say. So that means that in order to be effective with elevating the thinking of African Americans, that means you have to go directly to the source that is putting that sort of bad information out there into the minds of these people, the ones who were talking to you and could not answer your question about how has illegal immigration adversely affected African Americans. Could not answer that question. But to answer that question, it's a simple answer. Right now, all you have to do is look at the unemployment numbers for African Americans. African American unemployment numbers are just dropping. And one of the biggest reasons why those unemployment numbers are falling is because for decades, we've had hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants working on jobs. And I'm not talking about out in agriculture, out in picking strawberries or apples, pears, etc. I'm not talking about that. Most of them are not doing that. Most of them are working in places like 7-Eleven, and they're working at construction sites. They're doing those types of jobs that would often in the past would go to African Americans, especially African Americans who have a lower skill set. So over the last few decades, those jobs have been going to illegal immigrants, and business owners, they were doing that. They're employing these people for two main reasons. They can pay them less, and they don't get much BS from them. If they treat these employees wrong, they know that it's highly unlikely that they're going to complain, that they're going to file a discrimination suit. Because number one, they're here illegally. That's the biggest point. They're here illegally. So now with the question of whiteism, and I don't use the term white supremacy, and I don't use white because number one, they're not white, okay? And very often, historically, people have associated the word white with purity, with clean, being clean, purity. And other code words are associated with white. Oh, he has or she has good hair. She has straight hair, not kinky hair. So these are words, very, very powerful words that unfortunately African Americans themselves damage themselves with because they use these terms. They raise their children, and their children hear them using these negative terms that demean them. Now, the word supremacy, the opposite of supremacy, is inferior. So if I say white and I say supremacy, I am saying that I am lesser than. Now, some people will say, well, I don't think like that, though, T. West. I don't think like that. That's not what I'm thinking. I says, it doesn't matter what you're thinking, because you're thinking with your mind, but subliminally, you're also thinking. And more importantly, all of your children who are coming along right now, they hear this term, and it is a demeaning term. So you do not demean yourself. You do not demean yourself by saying the man is coming, denoting or meaning the police or the pale-skinned man is coming. The man is coming. Now, the man, I brought this up more than 10 years ago about the man. And we're going to get to this whole illegal immigration piece here in a moment here also.
Take your time, bro. Take your time.
So what you have the man. The opposite of that is the boy. The boy. Well, when you say the man, well, who is the man? You're a 50-year-old man, and you're saying the man is coming, you're a 50-year-old black man, what you are indicating, whether you want to admit it or not, you're indicating that you are lesser than. You are a boy. When you use the term white supremacy, you're saying that they are supreme over you. Now, look at it from this perspective. You have viruses. You have viruses that enter the human body. And those viruses come up against your immune system. And if your immune system is not strong, those viruses will make you ill and may even kill you. Cancer and other things will kill you. Now, very few people will say or admit or say that the virus is supreme. The virus is superior. Even though it killed you, it does not mean in the context of the whole, in the context of the entirety, it does not mean that that virus is superior, that that virus is dominant. So all of these words like the dominant race, okay, all of those words were taught to Malcolm X, were taught to other blacks in the universities by pale-skinned instructors, and very often Ashkenazim, or what you call the so-called Jew. These things were taught to them. So when Tim Wise and Ashkenazim, when he and others lecture and they use the term white supremacy, well, they are actually esteeming themselves. They're building themselves up by using that term. And when African Americans do it, they're also doing the same thing. Now, none of them are going to admit it because they've been doing this for a long time, and it's hard for them to break the habit. But they need to break the doggone habit, because you're indicating that you are inferior by using the term white supremacy. So I just say, hey, look, whiteism, tyranny, that's what it is. Now let's go to this whole illegal immigration situation. In Mexico, only recently in this century, did Mexico even recognize a category for Afro-Mexicans. Prior to that, it was like, you all don't even exist. You know, out of sight, out of mind, we're going to pretend that you don't exist. And wherever we can, we're going to dupe you all into miscegenation, into mixing with the rest of the population, with the other mestizos, so that we can blend out your blackness in Mexico. But that's not only true in Mexico, that's true in a hell of a lot of Hispanic countries. If you go into Brazil, you will see the same thing. You will see that same mentality. So when you talk about whiteism, or the term that you phrase your program with, yes, the so-called white supremacy, when you talk about that, well, let me tell you something. Historically, Spain rose to power as a world power before Britain, before the English. And they were the biggest enslavers of black people, far, far bigger than the British, the English, far bigger. Down in South American countries, all the way into Peru and other countries, the Spanish and the Portuguese, they enslaved African peoples in all of those lands. And then also enslaved them before the English did here in North America, in what became known as the United States. Because much of California and other parts of the country, Florida, much of that belonged to Spain at one time. Some people will come out and they will say falsely, erroneously, that it belonged to Mexico. No, no, no. Mexico was a colony of Spain. It belonged to Spain, and Spain sold it approximately around 1821. Spain sold it to the United States, sold those territories to the United States. So what?
Okay, so Thea, sorry to cut you off. So we need to set the record straight on there. So the the misconception is that there's an echo in the background. Are you watching on the live stream on another? There you go. So the misconception is that California, Nevada, Texas, New Mexico, that Arizona, I believe, was all Mexico at one time. And all the Hispanics are doing is reclaiming their land. Are you saying that Spain sold those territories to America?
Oh, certainly, certainly. That's history. That's a basic historical fact. Spain sold all of that to the United States, including Florida, sold to the United States. And here's the other point. You had many, many native tribes, and the mestizos were not, for the most part, in those areas. The mestizos in Mexico, they had their area, their geographical area. And here in the United States, you had the Comanche, you had the Apache, you had all of those Native American tribes who spoke their own languages and who would fight against the Mexicans who came in and tried to invade their territory. And in fact, Mexico teamed up at one time with the United States, with the English, to fight against the Native Americans. Okay, so that's a bunch of nonsense about they were already here. That's an exception of only a few of them were already here. For the most part, those were Native American people of various tribes who were already here, and those were their lands, not Mexico. Mexico took on the characteristic of Spain. Mexico tried to be a conqueror, just as Spain was. Spain, as I said, Mexico was a colony of Spain. Okay, so go ahead. You had another question or point you wanted to make, Amir?
Yeah. So, are you replaying the video on your laptop? Watching the actual chat room yourself?
No, it's coming through the speakers so that I can hear. That's about it.
Okay, it's just an echo, but we'll be all right.
Yeah, if you continue to talk, you won't hear that echo. The echo will kind of fall behind.
Okay, so there was a guy that said he was a Maxine Waters constituent, that he worked for Maxine Waters. And I asked him, what has Maxine Waters done for Black people in LA? Black people in LA are in a state of emergency. Of course, he started name calling me, calling me names. That's usually what they do. Then he said she kept a library in Compton from being shut down. Now, most Black people outside of LA probably don't know that Compton is now predominantly Hispanic or Latino. Same thing with South Central LA. Same thing with a lot of these, at one time, one of these predominantly Black neighborhoods. What is it going to take that Black people have to understand now that in Maxine Waters' district is predominantly Hispanic now and not Black? So therefore, she's not going to fight for Black people. But why aren't Black people realizing that?
Well, some of the African Americans in those communities there in Southern California, South Central Los Angeles, and the surrounding areas, some of them have come to the realization that it is a fight that they're not going to win. They simply don't have the numbers, and they never will have the numbers, because for the last 40 years, you've literally taken the population of Mexico, and now coming from countries even south of Mexico, to increase the population of California by millions. So you can't, as African Americans, you cannot compete with that. It's plain and simple. You can't. So some of them, they have pretty much reserved themselves to that fact, to that reality. And each one will have to make their own individual decisions based upon that reality and based upon whatever their resources are.
Thea, why are people holding Donald Trump accountable for these illegal aliens, but not holding the countries that they are coming from accountable?
Well, both is happening, actually, both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. There's no absolute either way. You have both situations where, of course, Donald Trump is being attacked because he is upsetting the apple cart. He is upsetting the status quo. And the status quo for the last 40 years has been to allow millions of illegal immigrants to enter this country for labor reasons, because employers want cheap labor, and also because you have some pale-skinned people who see illegal immigrants from Mexico and other Hispanic countries as a buffer between them and African Americans. This illegal immigration really started out very big not too long after the time of the 1960s, when blacks started advancing economically and educationally. That's when it started, and that's why I say it was a sabotage. So you have members of Congress who played a part in that, and who is playing a part in that, and they're members of both political parties, Democrats and Republicans. You have a Republican Party right now who is a majority in Congress right now, but yet they have not put together legislation to nip this illegal immigration in the bud. They haven't done it. So you have them, Republicans and their constituents, businesses who are benefiting at the higher level economically from the cheap labor. So they're reluctant to follow Donald Trump's lead in cracking down on the illegal immigration. Now, there was another part to your question also, I think. What was that?
No, that was it. Now you mentioned there's a part missing in this, Thea. Why aren't the employers who continue to hire these illegal immigrants, why aren't they held accountable for what they're doing?
Well, some of them are. Mainstream media simply don't give a whole lot of attention to it. Oh, some of them are. I mean, I did a program months ago. I mean, and how many people know this? That the Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against a Texas company doing business in Denver, and this related to the H-1B visa program, where American potential employees, they were required to take a drug test, okay, when they applied for the job. But these immigrants that they brought in under the H-1B visa program, they were not required to take a drug test to get these jobs. And all of those jobs, and I think there were about 13 of them that needed to be filled, all 13 of those jobs were filled with the H-1B visa people. None of them were filled by American citizens. Now, and that points to this whole game with drugs and drug testing. Okay, now marijuana is being made legal throughout much of the United States right now, but on some of these jobs, if you test positive for marijuana, well, that's a tick against you for getting that job. Okay, so people need to think. They need to be wise and understand how these people construct traps to entrap them, to keep them impoverished by not being gainfully employed. Okay, so we need to think about those things. So the government more and more is cracking down on employers who hire illegal immigrants. You just had a raid by ICE in Toledo, Ohio, of a meat packing plant. And they arrested 140 individuals from Guatemala and other countries, Hispanic countries. They arrested them, removed them from those jobs. Now, also, there's talk about there might be charges filed against that meat packing company because it appears that they knowingly were hiring illegal immigrants. They knew this. So, but once again, when these people lose those jobs, and Toledo has a considerable African-American population, when those people lose those jobs, when they're removed from those jobs by immigration, Well, some of those replacements are going to be with African American workers, which further drops the unemployment rate of African Americans. So there needs to be, to your point, there needs to be even greater enforcement and also prosecution of employers who knowingly hire illegal immigrants. That message needs to be sent out there even more. Now, mainstream media, they're not going to repeat these things over and over in the news because they know if they did, then people back in Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico, and other countries, they know that those people will say, well, you know, I probably shouldn't go there because look at what they're doing. There's no longer an incentive for me to go there. And employment is a big incentive for them to come here.
Let me ask you this too. A lot of these countries where you have illegals coming from, okay, a lot of them have black populations, okay, and we know in these countries that black people are marginalized. Why don't we see, if anybody had an excuse to illegally immigrate, would be the black people of these Hispanic or Central American countries? Why don't we see a lot of the black people trying to illegally immigrate from these countries?
Well, for the same reasons you don't see African Americans progress in certain economic and employment areas here in this country. There are barriers there that prohibit that, even though a few do come here, but you don't see a lots of them. Now, also, if the faces of these people became predominantly, or not even predominantly, but if you saw a whole lot more of these faces and they were black, then what you would see a pushback by the so-called liberals here in this country. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's just like when you want to sell something, when you want to sell an idea or a concept. Under whiteism, they would prefer to use one of their own faces to sell that concept. Or if you want to sell the concept of crime, then you're going to use a black face. Then you will use my face or your face to sell what you're trying to sell right there. Hello, Willie Horton. Okay? You would use that politically to sell what you're trying to sell with that. It depends on what you're trying to sell. And if you're trying to bring in more illegal immigrants into this country and the face looks like Haitians, well, Haitians, when you arrive here on the ocean, we turn that boat around, turn your ass around, get out, going back to Haiti. But if you're coming from Cuba and you're not dark skinned, well, come on in. The moment you touch the sand, you are automatically on the path to citizenship here in this country. Now, that's just a historical fact that I just stated right there. So you have lots of Afro Mexicans. You have over 1 million there in Mexico. At one time, they almost outnumbered, they almost did, and I think at one time they slightly did outnumber pale-skinned Europeans in Mexico. But and that is also the case here in the United States. We almost outnumbered in this country pale-skinned people until they started bringing them in by the boatload. Okay, allowing them to immigrate in. But those are just some historical facts. Now, but bringing it back to today, to the relevancy of today, here in the United States, the first area where most of the illegal immigrants go to, the first area are black communities. That is where they take a straight beeline, most of them, to African American communities. So for the last 40 years, African Americans have mostly felt the brunt of that.
Thea, let me start. Sorry to cut you off. Why do they come? Because I mean, we have this with illegal aliens. Obviously, when immigrants come to America, they open businesses in the Black community. Also, from my understanding, back during the HIV epidemic, and you had gay um, white males who were ostracized from the white communities, kicked out of the white communities. They came to the Black community. Why do all these marginalized groups come to the Black community? We let them in, then we end up getting marginalized and pushed out of our communities.
Well, for two reasons. The first reason is that blacks seem to, well, not seem to, they do generally, they empathize with that because no group, to some degree, with the exception of Native Americans, no group has experienced the long suffering as is the case with African Americans. So they have sympathy and empathy for people who are pushed out, who are ostracized. Okay, that's one. And number two, they do not have the power to say, we don't want you here. Okay? They don't have the power generally to do that. Even if they wanted to do that, they do not have the power to do it. So those are two reasons that come to mind as to why they come to African American communities. Now, when people, illegal immigrants come in, they're coming in, most of them are coming in with minimal means, with a small amount of money, if any. So housing is going to be cheaper in Black communities. Okay?
Right.
So it's naturally designed that way for them to go into those areas. And you also saw that with long ago when they discriminated against, they being the other pale skinned Americans, they discriminated against the Irish.
Right.
You saw once the Irish were elevated into the so-called white class, the Irish moved out and blacks moved into Irish communities. But even before some of the Irish had moved up, blacks were moving into areas where the Irish were. Okay, so and that's just a human characteristic, you know. You go into the area where you have the least amount of resistance.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right, and then also too. But again, when are Black people going to learn that happiness? And this also goes for Africa too, Africans in Africa, that this empathy is going to lead to your destruction. Like, when are Black people gonna wake up and realize that?
Well, many of them are already waking up to it. Okay, it's already happening. And when I was on called in on Al Sharpton's show, one thing that Al said was lots of blacks are turning against Black leadership. Okay, so they know, and more African Americans are waking up. You have now the power of multiplying knowledge. You have your channel. You have other sisters and brothers out here in social media, which is multiplying the knowledge into the minds of millions. And these people, they're listening. Right now, they're listening. They're listening all across America, not just America. They're listening all across the world right now as you and I discuss this. Mm-hmm. And I've stated before that you have a huge immigration issue with Africa. And you have millions of Africans trying to get to Europe, losing their lives, many of them being raped, some of them having their organs harvested in the past trying to get to Europe. And I've said, look, stay home, stay under your tree, make your situation better, stop running. Now in 2020, it will be 400 years of our people's sojourn here in North America. 400 years. And the overwhelming majority of our people, we did not run off to some other country. A few did. They went into Mexico at one time because Mexico abolished slavery at least a little more than 30 years before the United States did. And a few of them went up through the Underground Railroad into Canada. All right, you had that, but it was not a large scale situation like we see with illegal immigrants coming up from Hispanic countries and entering into the United States. And frankly, that is a fifth rail, is what that is. Meaning that once you get a certain number in this country, you could have a huge revolution in this country. And the Roman Church is a big, huge component behind this illegal immigration. I mean, very, very big. Now, you also mentioned Maxine Waters,
right,
and what she's stirring up out there, along with others, about harassing Trump administration officials, harassing them at their homes, harassing them when they go to restaurants to eat, refusing to serve them at restaurants. Well, in the 1950s and early 1960s, who was being refused service at restaurants in this country? That is the question. Who?
Us.
It was African Americans, okay? But yet you have this group of people, the so-called liberals, who says, well, we were with Dr. King. We embraced Malcolm X. Okay? You have this same group of people who are saying right now what their fathers and mothers were saying in the 1950s and 1960s about African Americans. Now, what do we call that? We call it hypocrisy. That's what it is. It's fakery. And Maxine Waters, she's too old for that. She's too old for that nonsense. But she knows that if she don't push what you and I see as absurd, if she does not push that absurdity, she knows that those Hispanics in California will find a way to vote her out of office because they have the numbers to do it. And she knows it. But she's not alone with that. Go ahead.
True. Guys, let's get the likes up. We have 245 people watching, only 106 likes. Please hit that like button. Let me send you with those likes again. If you're not super chatting, the least you can do is hit that like button. Let's speak on sanctuary cities and the correlation between sanctuary cities and I would say Black poverty or Black people being pretty much removed from these sanctuary cities. Is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair correlation?
No, not necessarily. No. I think you're talking about gentrification, right?
Well, gentrification. Well, this is what I'm noticing, that right wherever there's a sanctuary city, those cities are gentrifying, or Black people are being displaced. For the most part, Black people aren't doing good in these sanctuary cities. San Francisco, LA, believe Seattle, I want to say New York. They're trying to make Atlanta a sanctuary city. I mean, how do sanctuary cities benefit Black people for the most part?
They do not benefit the Black masses. They benefit the few Blacks who have a certain level of power, political power primarily. They benefit those individuals, but they do not benefit the masses of African Americans by no means. Sanctuary cities is not a good thing. It is not a good thing for African Americans, and it's certainly not a good thing for the United States of America. So the mayor in Atlanta, Black female.
Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Yes, she recently pushed some nonsense, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, right?
Oh yeah. For the jails not to accept ICE detainees. Yeah, bullshit.
Yeah. So And she may have had other motives for that. It may have been monetary motives. You know,
No.
I mean, but I don't know. I have no idea. But I know that the DNC was pushing hard with that. So I know the national component is pushing hard at her and other mayors for this whole concept of sanctuary city. I know that. So sanctuary cities, once again, is not good at all. Philadelphia, Baltimore, sanctuary cities. All right, and
All
it's
right.
not good.
Well, Theo, why are these black politicians treated like sacred cows when they're obviously upfront, unapologetically working towards the demise of black people?
Well, the this the question of, okay, if you get rid of them, if you vote them out of office, who are you going to replace them with? Okay, that's the first question you have to think about. And the second part of that is the reality that these people are bankrolled by some very wealthy and powerful people. So whoever is going to run against them, if they are going to run according to the principles that you and I espouse, then that means that you and I and the grassroots people in the community would have to bankroll them. And for the most part, that's not going to happen. You don't have enough money to bankroll them. All right. So fundamentally, in the United States, you have a very terrible and growing problem with the political system in this country. And it's not going to be easily corrected. Now, you know, the phrase that every now and then you need a revolution to fix the situation. Well, then it becomes a question of, well, what sort of revolution? What kind of revolution? Okay, you have the non-violent revolutions, and you also have the violent revolutions. So what sort of revolution would be deployed to fix the situation? So, but there is still hope in certain areas. In certain areas, there's still hope. You have some mavericks who do come to political power. But they also have to be careful because over time, they are bought off. They become complacent. Just as, and we've seen that with many politicians. When they start out with the right mind, with the right ideology. They start out with the right platform, supporting the right causes and programs. But over time, so often you see them deviate from that. So it's not a simple matter.
Should black people be considered the slave trade? You know, we went through 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, laws that marginalized us. Should we feel sorry for immigrants, or should we be impressed by immigrants that come to this country that we helped, that we pretty much established?
Well, as I've said before, illegal immigrants coming into this country, they're not coming into this country to unite with you for the most part. Now, you have some individuals who have good character and they understand. They understand what you're saying. And they're like, well, okay, hey, I'm an ally with you. But those are exceptions. So most of them, they're coming into this country to get what you are trying to get, or to get what you have already. That's why they're coming. They're coming to get your cake. And the faster African Americans realize that, the faster they're going to change that situation. So about feeling sorry for them, for the most part, no. About children being separated from their mothers. No, most of that is propaganda. Mm-hmm. And you've seen some of that come out in the media recently about the picture did not represent what the media was saying that it represented. That child was not separated from her mother, from her parents. And it indicates how far these people, and I'm talking about mainstream media, I'm talking about religious persons, I'm talking about political leaders. It shows you how far they will go and how low they will go. They will lie and connive to push that agenda, the illegal immigrant agenda. That is how far they will go. So it is, and more importantly, it is a question of how far will you, will I, will those who are listening, how far will you go to push back against what is coming to take your economic pie? Plain and simple. You cannot compete with them. You can't compete with them. It's impossible. You don't have the numbers, and they're going to work far cheaper than you will. Okay? Mm-hmm. And they're going to cut corners, economic corners, that you won't cut. Now, long ago, there was African Americans, what you see the Hispanics doing in general when they first come into this country, of how they commune together, how they collectively may live in one house, lots of them, 10 of them, 13, 15 of them in one house for a while and they're saving up their money until they can buy other things. When you see that, African Americans used to do that also in this country long ago, and a few still do. Okay, a few, not a lot. Now, but there are some other consequences to that also, which is sometimes some bad things happen in that situation. You have incest that happens in a crowded house where you have lots of people. You have children being sexually molested. So I just did a program recently where a young Hispanic male was talking about in Mexico, the age of consent is 12 years old. 12, not 18, but 12 in Mexico. So you see all of that, and you see some of that happening here in this country. So the state of California is trying to change some of its laws to accommodate certain aspects of that culture. So child molestation, instead of certain things being a felony, they're trying to move it down to a misdemeanor. So and that's not good. That's not good. So but again, as I said, feel sorry? No, I don't think so. You cannot be feeling sorry, especially when you don't know what the real deal is. When the media comes out and say this little girl right here, she was separated from her mother, and you learn later, well, that was a damn lie.
Right.
Yeah. So generally, no. I mean, you can have compassion, but your compassion needs to be seasoned with intelligence. Okay? Because a drug addict, if you have compassion on a drug addict without being intelligent about that situation, that drug addict will steal everything in your house.
True.
And sell it to support their habit. So compassion with intelligence, though.
I'm gonna write that down. Compassion with intelligence. So Thea, someone asked in the chat room, are there any sanctuary cities for Black people in America? And should Black people have a contingency to create their sanctuary cities outside of America?
No, there are no sanctuary cities for African Americans in the United States of America. Now, the best sanctuary that African Americans can have is not a place. That is not the best sanctuary. The best sanctuary for African Americans, if you're a mother, if you're a father, is for you to instill in your children the best that you can instill in them. Have them educated, you educate them first, and then get them into educational systems that is going to secure their future. That is by far the best sanctuary that we as a people can have, and learn to think. Teach your children to think creatively. That is the best sanctuary. Now, as I said, no, there's no place to run. I mean, look, you've been here for 400 years and most of you are still here. Do you think you're going to run? Well, hey, look, as I've always said, we built this. We built it. This great wealth. People boast about America, the greatest city, a city shine out, sitting on a hill, shining on a hill, the greatest city in history. They say that, okay? But we built this. We built it. It was our labor that built the great wealth of this country. Before the pale-skinned female came over here, before that pale-skinned male brought her over here, all of the infrastructure needed to be built. Safety, there needed to be security there. And they used our ancestors to bring all of that to America. And when we built all of this, then the Germans, the Italians, the French, and others started coming over here in the millions. Most of us were here long before most of them. We were already here, working, building this infrastructure under enslavement here in North America. So again, the best thing, the best sanctuary that we as a people can have is a sanctuary of what we have in our heads, in our minds. That is the best right there. And some of you are looking to someday, oh, I'm going to go away in the great by and by and all. Look, right here in this life, make it happen right here. You've never been to the other side, and you haven't talked to anybody over there who's been to the other side. So make it happen right here. Don't make excuses about waiting until the great by and by. Do it now.
Now, I tell people this story. So when I was in West Africa, I was in Togo. I went to Benin, crossed the border. It's called the frontier from Togo to Benin. Then on the way back, all right, my visa expired. I crossed the border anyway. I got to the airport, and when I was trying to leave, they said, hey, we're not going to let you leave until you pay your fees. If you don't pay your fees, we're going to basically lock you up. So I paid my fees. They let me go, come back to America. Now, every country has their own immigration policies, visa policies, borders, border control, and they're very, very careful on who they let in and out of the borders. Why is America being so criticized about who they let in and out of the borders when a lot of these countries where illegals come from or immigrants come from are just as stringent when deciding or critical on deciding who they let come into their country?
Well, unlike most of the countries that you're talking about, even though you have successful people, you have in certain sectors that are very good economically, but they are not like, or there is no perception, as is the case with America being the land that flows with milk and honey. So people around the world, many of them think and believe, and they've been taught to believe and brainwashed to believe that they have a right to what is America. They have a right to come and enter into America and remain here and partake of the honey in America. That is, unfortunately, that is what's taught. And some people, when they come here, they may come. Some come from various African countries to America, and some of them succeed and they have good success here. Others come here and they discover that, well, I would have been doing better back in my home country. Some of them discover that. So um, the you have different cases. Is what I'm saying. There are different cases for different people. Some succeed, others do not. So it's individuals. So yes, people, lots of people want to come to the United States of America for what they think that they will get here or what they think they can or will accomplish here. They've been taught through movies, through Hollywood, that you can make it in America. Your dreams can come true in America.
Hmm. Do you know much about was it H-1B1 visas?
Not a hell of a lot. I mean, I know about them, yes.
I mean,
Uh, what's the question about them?
I guess the question is, people are saying that if we don't allow, I guess, East Indians into our country via the H-1B1 visa, Silicon Valley would pretty much self-destruct. Do you think there's any truth to that, or are there enough, we'll say, Black Americans or American-born talent to fill in if that were to happen?
Well, here's a situation. Here's a situation. Um, the United States, this government uh, could do pretty much could accomplish most of the goals that it decides that it wants to accomplish. Okay. Now, um, our government and also big business corporations, they sabotaged much of America. Over the last several decades, they sabotaged America. They sabotaged generations here in the United States. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean this. You had companies, American companies, who would send their people over to India, over to China, and over to other countries, Asian countries. And they would provide money, they would provide funding through NGOs for training in mathematics, very good training, training the children over there to become good at computer analysis, data transformation, computer programming, cybersecurity. They provided that in foreign countries, whereas they were not providing much of that here in this country, only to a select few in certain elite universities, MIT and other elite universities. But they were providing it to foreign countries. Now, they saw it as a benefit. If you take a Microsoft, if you take an IBM, these are high-tech companies. If you take an Intel, you take these companies, they saw it as a benefit. And there were multiple benefits to it. One of the benefits was that, hey, these people have, at least these children, these young adults or teenagers over here in these other foreign countries, they have a different mindset about things. They really want this. They have hunger for this knowledge, for this training. But that wasn't the only component. That wasn't the only thing that they were looking at. They were also looking at the fact that once they were trained in these things and they were allowed to come into this country under the H-1B visa program, that they could pay these people less. They were still being paid quite well, okay? Maybe some of them who came into the country, for example, in a certain technical position, maybe they might be paid $35 an hour, $35 an hour. Whereas for that same position, an American citizen might be being paid $45 or $50 an hour. So the business saw that as a win-win for them with the H-1B visa because they're paying much less. Okay, so so you had that part of it, that component of it. They saw it as a win-win. Wall Street companies saw it as a win-win for them. Now, but what they did not see, and they stopped seeing, was that if they trained Americans here in this country in the same way, that they would have more American citizens with a skill set to handle the technical jobs that they claim that, well, we are going to have to bring in some people from India for this data mining job, or we're going to have to bring in some people from China for this. All right. So corporations, unfortunately, and I'm not saying totally, but generally, corporations have shirked their responsibility to an extent of making sure that they made the right decisions along with government in making sure that students in the school systems and even outside the school systems, that they're trained in the technologies and skill set that is going to be necessary for these companies to operate efficiently. You've got with military skills to build military machines, military hardware, all of that. Right now, the United States is, to some degree, they're falling behind. Russia and China, in some areas militarily, with military equipment, military hardware, they are ahead of the United States. That's just a fact. And part of it is due to the fact of ethnic strife here in the United States. You have hungry people, and I'm not talking about just food-wise hungry. I'm talking about hungry for knowledge, hungry for a real good education, and you've had that for a long time, especially among African Americans. Now, in the last several years, a lot of that's been I would say a lot of that has been appeased, or that's not the word. A lot of that has been a massage through giving them pacifiers, video games and things like that to calm them down, to calm that mind down, to get that mind off into something else, when those minds would be better in learning physics, learning chemistry, learning mechanical engineering, learning how to make these things, how to make things work. So corporations have a big part to play in that, and the U.S. government has a big part to play in that. And of course, parents do also. Parents have a big part to play in that. So with the H-1B visa programs, there is some truth to, yeah, we need some people, and we don't have enough people to fill this particular niche in this country. So what I just got through explaining was some reasons why they don't have enough people in some areas, some niche areas, to fill such positions. Okay, so I'll end on that right there, that part.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this. Let's see, misery merchants. How do you, and this is might be somewhat off topic, how do you feel about Black people just no matter what, it's a wrap, there's no coming back, it's over for us in America? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. Misery loves company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Black folk can rap, 24/7 about their misery, about what's wrong and the hell. Okay. But, that's not going to move you anywhere. It's not going to move you forward. So you got to get up and you got to make it happen. You got to keep pinching yourself and pushing yourself to make it happen. And when you do that, it makes you a special person. It makes you stronger. It's just like a weight room. If you want to be buff and all, it's not going to happen if you don't go into the weight room and do the exercise to make it happen. And that's true intellectually also. That's true. That's true with what we're talking about. In order to progress, you got to put your body, your mind through the exercise, through the ringer in order to make that happen. So, it's there are better days ahead for us. It's just that sometimes real hell begins to come to wake us up in order to get us tuned up for where we need to go next.
And we've already touched on this. What are your thoughts about, again, just Black people, especially in California, being so socially ambiguous, not focusing on Black issues? One day they want to march for, to protest the airport ban, as far as the Muslim ban or whatnot. Then the next day they want to march for the, white women who voted for white women versus white women who voted for Trump march. Then they want to march for illegal immigration, but they don't want to put all that energy into focusing on Black issues. What's wrong with these people? Thea, what are
Well,
your thoughts?
you're always going to have some of that. Okay, there's always going to be some of that, and focusing on Black issues, African American issues, that requires vision. It requires people. It requires leadership who have vision. The old saying, biblical saying, where there's no vision, the people perish. And it takes leaders to articulate vision. And then when people see, and they are able to see and understand the vision that leader or leaders are articulating, then they buy into it, and then they start moving with that vision. So that is, we're at a point in this country as African Americans where you have some of the older leaders who are moving on. They're dying off. Some of them are becoming ill, so they're moving to the sideline. And you have a new caliber of leaders who are coming along. And it is good to debate things. And I saw part of the debate with you, Brian Logan, and Brother Scott, Phil Scott, and the other brother. So, and that was good. It's good because you need to have those debates, because the people need to understand which of the individuals who are articulating the vision, which of them are articulating the best vision. Okay. And it's just like the world, the soccer matches, the football matches that are happening in Russia right now.
Right.
What is that? The World Cup?
World Cup.
Okay. So you have the process of elimination, or the NBA, you have the playoffs, you have the process of eliminations. And it's good to see brothers and sisters debating with each other, because some of them, they're out there, it's just a bunch of hot air, okay? They're not saying much of substance, but they're not going to know that. And some of their listeners are not going to know that until they come up against someone who knows what he or she is talking about. And then that is the way of moving forward, because you need to attach yourself to people who have the right vision, who's moving forward towards the right goals. So yeah.
All right, so I'm on my Facebook timeline, or whatever you want to call it. So Al Sharpton leads vigil for kids separated from parents at border and held in New York. Why are these leaders still even treated as credible? Why are they even considered credible still? Al
Well, they're
and
well, they're
Maxine, John Lewis, like why?
well. Some people do it out of respect for the fact that they've been out there a long time. Some people just do it out of respect. Others, others do not see them as leaders.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's a mixed bag right there. Increasingly, as Al Sharpton said on his show when I called in, you know, more and more African Americans are attacking black leadership. Okay, and that's good because what more and more what African Americans are saying is that we see where we are versus where we probably should be, and we are upset about that, and we want to change this situation. We want to move forward. So it is proper. It is the right decision to question leaderships in that situation. That's why in this country, every 4 years you have a presidential election. And if the guy in office did not do so well, and if the majority of the people say, "Well, we didn't like what you did. We want to change leadership," well, they do that. Well, African Americans in a different way can do the same thing with the leadership, with the activist leadership, political leadership that's out here. You should be able to do the same thing. Yeah.
Let's see what comments we have in the chat room. Let's see here. Let's see here. Somebody says disappointed in John Lewis. Al Sharpton is out. It's time for these black leaders to move out the way. But it's weird because now people are saying, okay, it's time for these black leaders, legacy black leaders, to move out the way. But now they're putting Sean King in front of us, and you know, like it's like they have a contingency plan in place for us for some reason. How should people uh, treat people like Sean King and I guess the new black leadership that they're now trying to put in front of us? Even though I think Sean King is white, but whatever. How should people treat that?
Well, I don't know much of. I know very little about Sean King, so I can't speak to him. But
And
to
here's another one: Angela Rye, Maxine Waters, understudy, etc.
yeah, well, here's the thing, and you're talking about sounds like you're talking about mostly political leadership.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Well, um, political leadership can come and go. Okay, they could be a shining star today, but tomorrow they're gone. All right. So the thing is that today it's a new age, and it's a new age because of social media, and lots of people discovered that a couple of years ago in November, almost 2 years ago in November. They discovered that when Trump won, and mainstream media was shocked, totally blown away, totally, and they blamed it on social media, and they called social media fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a new day. You're going to have most of the voices that are being heard now is not being heard through traditional media. Most of the voices that are being heard now, even though there's a large number of voices now, are being heard through social media. Okay, so social media is going to play a big role in establishing new leadership and also new black leadership. A huge role. So that's where it's at. That's what's happening.
All right, everybody. We have 241 people watching, 169 likes. Let's get the likes up. Tia, Brother West, what we'll do, we'll go ahead and close out. Once again, thank you for joining and coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. We have to do this more often. Just in closing, let's go back to the topic. Are illegal immigrants fighting white supremacy or partnering with white supremacy?
Oh, definitely not partnering with, definitely not fighting it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the original, okay? Down in Mexico, down in South America, Central American countries, where the Spaniards came, the Portuguese came, they were the first. And all you have to do is look at how blacks are treated in Brazil.
Right.
And look at how blacks are and have been pushed to the side in Mexico, and that will tell you a lot. Now, another thing too, I should say this too. Most of the mestizos,
Right.
the mestizo simply means mixed. Okay, in America, you would refer to it as the term you would probably use would be for mixed. You would use what's the word? Mulatto.
Mulatto, mixed, mulatto color. Yeah.
Okay, so mestizo. So mestizo in Mexico is a mix of the Spaniards and the native people, a mix of Africans and the native peoples. And sometimes with some people, with some individuals, when they become mixed, even though their grandmother was a black woman, when they become mixed and they come out a little lighter in complexion, okay, they get a little big-headed. They think they have made it to the other side. So therefore on the application, they'll check mark Caucasian. Okay? And when they know damn well that their grandmother or their great-grandmother was a black woman. Okay? So, and they will look down upon and despise other black people. But you not only have that scenario with some people within Hispanic countries coming into America, but you also have aspects of that among African Americans also, who are mixed. Okay, and now some people will attack the fact that somebody is mixed. Well, I'm not like that. You had nothing to do with who your mother was, who your father was. You have nothing to do with the fact that you're mixed. And there are some great, great people who are mixed. Great mulattoes.
Right.
Okay. All right, and that's a fact. So I don't even go there. I don't even get into that nonsense. And they will be allies with you, some of them. So you look at people and you judge them according to their character. So with whiteism, unfortunately, lots of Hispanics have more often than not, allied themselves with aspects of America and Americans and American history that are adversely opposed to African Americans. That's unfortunately the case for the benefits that they get out of that. So African Americans should and must reject illegal immigration. And as I've often said, African Americans should register as independents. I'm not telling you how to vote, but register as an independent because they track that.
Right.
They track it. And you're sending a message when you do that. And also, as I've always say, it's a question of illegal immigration or reparations. If the Congress is going to continue with kicking the ball down the road and promoting this illegal immigration, then African Americans must demand reparations in this country. We must demand that the Congressional Black Caucus push and promote House Resolution 40, That's in the House, but it needs to be in the Senate also, and it needs to be bipartisan. So we need to get Representative, I think it's Scott, the senator in South Carolina.
Yeah.
We need to get him on board with that as well. Okay. You got in 2020, you got the 400-year celebration, or some people wouldn't call it a celebration, of 400 years being here as African Americans in North America. And we should be prepared to make a big statement starting right now. And you cannot compete. I say again, you cannot compete in numbers and economically with illegal immigration. You can't compete with that. Impossible. So what Trump is doing is a good thing. I applaud him for that. I do not applaud him for some other things, but I applaud him for that. So and that's what you do. When something is put on the table, some of the food items on the table, you may not have an appetite for. You may not like it, but you pick what you do like and you run with it. So that's the case with Trump. The things that he does that are good, those things I applaud. But what he does that's not good, I don't applaud that. I'll even speak against some of those things. So that's how we have to be. We cannot be just straight blue. We have to be thinkers, and we have to look out for our own self and collective interests. We have to do that as African American people.
All right, Brother D. And tell everybody, share your contact information, how everyone can reach you. Brother Doug put your YouTube page in the chat room as well, but go ahead and share that with everybody how they can reach out to you. And guys, make sure you follow the link that Doug put in the chat room, and go subscribe to Brother Thea West's YouTube page as well.
Yeah, well, once again, Amir, thank you for the invitation to your program. We always have an interesting discussion. Mm-hmm. You have good questions, and some of your viewers out there, they also submit some good questions. I appreciate that.
Oh, no
yes, so you can reach AfroSynergy News on YouTube, just AfroSynergy. Type that word in, Google it, you'll find it. And then I'm also out on Facebook as well. T West, my full name is Theophorus. THEA, that's just a small abbreviation of my full name. But T West, everyone calls me T West. You can find the content out there, and I cover a range of topics. A range. I mean, if you want to talk geopolitics, we can talk that. You want to talk Africa, we can talk that. So you want to talk about issues, domestic issues right here, we can talk that on the AfroSynergy News channel. So once again, Amir, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And guys, make sure you go to search for Huru on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. Also go to Africa Personified on those same platforms. Make sure you go to searchforhuru.com, DynasAmir.com, AfricaPersonified.Africa, and go to Amazon.com, search your name, Dynasty Amir. Please buy a book. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, peace.